Welcome back to the channel, everyone. You've joined us for a throwdown between the Durston X-Mid Pro 1, the Zpacks Altaplex, and the Zpacks Plex Solo for the crown of best single-person ultralight tent. I've been hiking with the Altaplex for a couple of years and have really liked it. A friend has been hiking with the Plex Solo and also likes it. I'm impressed and intrigued by the X-Mid Pro 1, but I'm not coming into this comparison with a bias against Zpacks by any means. I'm just looking for the best tent. We'll be putting all three tents through their paces in the areas of build quality, pitching, weight, livability, design details, price, and a large focus on stormworthiness. I pitched the Durston tent and did a general overview in a prior video, which I'll link up above and in the description. Right now I'm pitching my Altaplex while getting distracted carrying on a conversation, so my slow pace will give me a chance to do an overview of the three tents. All the details are also in a spreadsheet which I'll link in the description, where I also put all the weights and measures in metric units. To keep things straight, I'll put the Zpacks logo on the screen if I'm showing a Zpacks tent, and the Durston Gear logo on the screen if I'm showing the X-Mid Pro 1. If I've missed anything you'd like to know, please drop a comment below and I'll be glad to answer. First, build quality. The upper part of all three tents is made of DCF or Dyneema composite fabric. Zpacks offers a choice between 0.55 ounce per square yard material and 0.75 ounce per square yard material, and also offers some color choices. In this video, the Plex Solo is 0.55 ounces per square yard in spruce green, and the Altaplex is 0.75 ounces per square yard in dirt color. The X-Mid Pro is only available in 0.55 ounces per square yard material in spruce green. Strangely, the DCF of the Plex Solo, while supposedly being the same weight as the DCF of the X-Mid Pro, seems to be significantly more translucent. The opacity of the X-Mid Pro is comparable to the Altaplex, which is a heavier weight DCF, so I wonder if Durston Gear has sourced a better quality DCF than Zpacks. The seams of the Zpacks tents are sewn and only bonded at corners. The seams of the X-Mid Pro are bonded everywhere. The X-Mid Pro 1 definitely wins on build quality. Next, pitching. Both the Zpacks tents require a minimum of 6 stakes if you pitch them like I do, where I attach all 3 of the lines on the back to a single stake. Then you'll also have to stake out all 4 corners and the doors in the front. The X-Mid Pro requires only 4 stakes to stake out the 4 corners, which is a point in its favour. Because I live in the Ozarks and I've broken titanium stakes trying to get them into the ground, I always carry 1 more stake than the minimum. On the Zpacks tents I use the spare to stake out where my head will be when I'm lying down and pull that end out a bit, and on the X-Mid Pro I stake out one of the doors. The Zpacks tents offer more flexibility on stake positioning because they pitch higher and thus have longer guy lines which give you more angles to play with. This is a point in favour of Zpacks when trying to find a place that isn't solid rock to get the stakes into the ground. The pitch technique for the Zpacks tents is to stake out a taut line across the back of the tent, then insert the already extended pole, hoist the mainsail, stake out the front, then go around and add other stakes. The pitch technique for the X-Mid is to stake out the 4 corners in sequence, i.e. not diagonally opposite. Make sure the corners are all right angles, then get underneath with the trekking poles and extend them in place. If you try to use an already extended trekking pole, then it doesn't work. I don't find either tent difficult to pitch, although the Zpacks tents require a bit more tightening and adjusting after the initial pitch. Point to the X-Mid Pro there. The Zpacks tents have a maximum of 10 attachment points for stakes, complete with pre-attached adjustable guy lines, which you can remove if you don't want them. The X-Mid Pro has up to 12 attachment points. The 4 corners have pre-attached adjustable lines. 2 further points in the center of each end have shock cord. To the other points you'd have to attach line, which does come with the tent, and line locks, which don't come with the tent. Outside you'll need a rectangle of about 6 feet by 9 feet to pitch the X-Mid Pro 1, and 8 feet by 10 feet to pitch either Zpacks, perhaps up to 11 feet if you use long guy lines. The X-Mid Pro 1 definitely wins on footprint, and overall the pitching category comes out just in favour of the X-Mid Pro 1. Next, weight. The Plex Solo weighs 13.9 ounces with the lighter DCF and 15.4 ounces with the heavier DCF. The Altaplex weighs 15.4 ounces with the lighter DCF and 17.2 ounces with the heavier DCF. The X-Mid Pro 1 weighs 16.5 ounces. If we do a bit of maths, we can arrive at a minimum carry weight for what you're going to need for each tent. There's the tent itself, stakes, stuff sack, and poles. To get a true apples-to-apples comparison, I'm going to calculate using Zpacks carbon fiber tent poles for all three tents. You'll need one 52-inch pole for the Plex Solo, one 60-inch pole for the Altaplex, and two 48-inch poles for the X-Mid Pro 1. So that's 2.8 ounces for the Plex Solo, 3.9 ounces for the Altaplex, and 5.2 ounces for the X-Mid Pro 1. Tent stakes will be 3.1 ounces for both Zpacks tents, and 2.2 ounces for the X-Mid Pro 1. I use regular MSR groundhogs and an MSR groundhog mini for my spare stake. Stuff sacks are 0.4 ounces for all three tents. If we add all that up, we come to 20.2 ounces for the Plex Solo, 24.3 ounces for the X-Mid Pro 1, and 24.6 ounces for the Altaplex. The absolute weight winner is the Plex Solo, but using what appears to be a poorer quality DCF. It's a dead heat between the Altaplex using the thicker DCF and the X-Mid Pro 1. If all those numbers were too hard to visualize, you can find them in the spreadsheet. Of course, you probably have trekking poles, so I standardized on using tent poles just for comparison purposes. Your weight needed to pitch each tent will include whatever pole or poles you carry. In my case, I love my long knock trekking pole, which has saved me from disaster on river crossings on multiple occasions. So even though with the X-Mid Pro I could go to a shorter, lighter trekking pole and actually end up saving weight, I probably won't. Now, on to livability. Zpacks says that their tents should be a minimum of 6 inches off the ground. I've pitched the Altaplex much lower than that this time to give it the best possible chance against the X-Mid Pro 1 in the upcoming storm test. That results in the front of the bathtub being extremely high, and thus a cramped interior where the side wall is practically on my shoulder when I sit up, and the end walls are almost on my face and feet. You'll see that in a minute when I talk about interior space. I do try to pitch low when I know there's going to be a storm or really cold weather, and in those cases I end up with a lot of condensation as well. The X-Mid Pro 1 pitches low to the ground and at the same height all around. Condensation isn't so much of a concern because it has the vents in the roof, which is an excellent design choice. The bathtub floor of the Zpacks tents is 1 ounce per square yard DCF, whereas the Durston is a 15 denier nylon with water-resistant coating. I'm concerned that the nylon might wet out, so I'll be testing that later in this video. The Altaplex does give you these lifters here, which enable you to pull the bathtub floor up even higher, and gives you about 8 inches there on the back. But you also do that at the expense of floor space on the inside, so I don't really have anywhere that I can go side to side, and I've lost room where I can store things around my sleeping pad because I've pulled these lifters up. So I've lost headroom, my face is going to be much closer to the tent itself, and I've lost room in the foot end as well. I'm right up at the end there, so by pulling them up you lose interior space. The Pro 1 doesn't have bathtub lifters, and the height of the bathtub is 4 inches. On the Pro 1, the geometry of the interior setup means the corner of the bathtub is almost touching the exterior wall, so that's a potential weak point where rain could splash in. Stay tuned to see how that works out in the storm test. For interior space, the bathtub floor is the same size for both Zpacks tents, at a claimed 36 inches wide by 90 inches long. You have to pitch higher and not use the bathtub lifters to get close to that width and length, and that width also is only at the center as the tent tapers both horizontally and vertically towards both ends. Pitching for a storm like I have gives you about 30 inches wide in the center by 84 inches long. The X-Mid Pro 1 is a rectangle of 32 by 90 inches, which doesn't vary with pitch height. As pitched, the Altaplex is 55 inches high inside, the Plex Solo is 51 inches high inside, and the X-Mid Pro 1 is 45 inches high inside. Not all of that height is usable on the Zpacks tents, because the walls close in towards the peak. The end walls angle up more steeply on the Altaplex than the Plex Solo because it's a taller tent, but here I have more headroom in the Plex Solo because I pitched it higher off the ground. So much of your experience with the Zpacks tents depends on how you pitch them, and you end up trading storm protection for living space. The end walls angle up even more steeply on the X-Mid Pro one because of the use of 2 poles. It ends up being much roomier inside since almost all the space is usable. The X-Mid Pro 1 wins by a mile on livability. Design details. All 3 tents have a screen to prevent bugs getting in. The Pro 1 can be opened and closed with one hand and doesn't fall onto the ground. Both Zpacks tents require 2 hands and the screen falls down when open. The trekking pole will probably make the screen fall into the tent, where you have to be careful not to sit on it. For both Zpacks tents, the trekking pole sets up in the middle of the vestibule, and there is a guy line in the center of the outer doors, making it harder to get in and out. On the X-Mid, the poles are offset and storage doesn't block the door, which doesn't have any guy lines in the way. The X-Mid Pro 1 uses a combination of zippers and magnetic fasteners, while the Zpacks tents use toggles, hooks and zippers. The X-Mid Pro 1 definitely takes the category of design details. As far as price, the Plex Solo costs $599 with shipping included. The Altaplex costs $675 with shipping included, and if you live in Florida you'll also have to pay tax on Zpacks products. The X-Mid Pro 1 costs $599 plus $19 shipping and handling for a total of $618. The Plex Solo is the cheapest, but the X-Mid Pro 1 is cheaper than the Altaplex. Ranking based on value for money, the X-Mid Pro 1 is a much clearer winner with the features and quality included at the price. Seriously. We made a rainstorm like this. So I don't know if you can hear me at all over this massive storm that we've got going on outside, but you can see that there's a significant amount of backsplash here, and really I have lost all my vestibule. The water's coming to my shoes, and this is just wind and rain, or simulated wind and rain, but I'm really getting wet in here myself. It's splashing through the screen, and we're just dropping the sprinklers pretty much on top of the tent with a fan blowing behind them to just generate some randomness like gusts of wind would. Pretty soon there's going to be water underneath this tent, and as you would get with any tent, but the fly isn't really keeping the water out from the forward direction. The good news is here that even though I'm getting a little bit of splash, it's not really getting over the bathtub here, because the bathtub is at super high 16 inches out here in the front. The Stormworthiness test yielded surprising results. For the frontal assault with the sprinklers and wind, the clear winner was the X-Mid Pro 1. Even with the Altaplex pitched as low as I could and the bathtub as high as I could, the doors were just no defense, and rain splashed up underneath, meaning that I couldn't have the screen open. This was not an issue whatsoever with the X-Mid Pro 1. So it's still dry inside the vestibule here. You can see it dripping down off, but not splashing back under. There is a little bit of splash there in the gutter, but it's not coming up through the gutter into the tent. That, I don't know if you can see little droplets there, that's underneath. So it's not splashing back up through the gutter into the living area. And because the bathtub doesn't depend on the screen being closed, I actually can sit in here with the screen open and I'm still stormproof inside here. We tested backsplash like this. And also like this. For the backsplash test, the end gutters of the X-Mid Pro 1 did end up getting wet. No water made it through into the bathtub though, and you could use more stakes than I did and fasten down maybe another inch closer to the ground. The gutters of the Altaplex really didn't get wet, because it seems like the overhang of the tent is wider. But the gutters of the Plex Solo did get wet because it was pitched higher, and even the wide overhang didn't provide protection at that height. Overall, the X-Mid Pro 1 still wins here, because despite pitching the Altaplex so low that it became cramped inside, the lack of protection in the front outweighs the extra protection on the back and ends. I was curious whether the nylon floor of the X-Mid Pro 1 would wet out, so I filled up a baking tray with water, slid it underneath, and held the floor of the tent down into it using my cook pot to leave it overnight and see what would happen. So it's now midnight. I set this up here at 5. It's been here for 7 hours. It has not yet wet out. So it's now 8 o'clock the following morning. This has been sitting here for 15 hours. And it hasn't wet through. There's some condensation underneath where that pot was, but it hasn't wet through anywhere where it was sitting in the water. It actually is raining this morning. You might be able to hear it. It's just a gentle rain, but it rained quite a bit in the night, and I came out to check this morning and I don't see any backsplash up into the bathtub here in the Durston. I don't know exactly how hard it rained compared to the storm that we made, but nonetheless it's still bone dry inside here. Final thoughts. For me, the X-Mid Pro 1 comes out the overall winner at this point. Obviously I can't speak to durability because I only just got this tent. The bathtub floor is thin and you shouldn't pitch it in the middle of a briar patch, but you shouldn't pitch any tent in a briar patch. I don't see any reason why with care it wouldn't last you hundreds of nights outdoors. If weight is your ultimate deciding factor, then the Plex Solo is the winner. But in terms of quality, pitching, livability, design details and stormworthiness, the X-Mid Pro 1 comes out on top, while still incredibly being a £1 tent. I'll be taking it out on the trail next week, so subscribe to be notified when that video comes out. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll see you in the next one.